Welcome back, everybody. We're going to complete our series of superheat and subcool videos on the high temperature side, and then we're going to get into low temperatures and medium temperature systems like coolers and freezers. I want you to better understand superheat and subcool on this journey before we get into that type of equipment where things do change a little bit. Behind me we have this diagram where I'm going to walk you through when you put your clamps on there and you grab these values and that data starts to compute and puts out 6 or 8 different readings. I want you to better understand what those numbers mean, and if you have to make a change, what you should be able to expect so the numbers move in the right direction. Stay tuned. Okay, we're going to jump right into it. I'm going to give you an analogy how you can better understand superheat and subcool, right? Because one, we're looking for vapor, the other one, we're looking for liquid. There has to be the right amount of liquid and the right amount of vapor. You can't have too much of either one. And when you understand those numbers, you get to understand how the system is behaving and if it's behaving correctly as the manufacturer has designed it. This is a cup. This cup is empty. And so if this cup's job is to hold a liquid, then we would say that that liquid is coming from the condenser coil if this is an air conditioning that we're talking about. And so if this represented my condenser coil and no liquid is coming from that, then if I want it to boil off, I have no water, I have no liquid to boil off, right, in this sense. So if I was to take a pot and turn up the heat to high and I go to tip this empty cup upside down, nothing's going to boil. And it's just that simple. So when we look at our evaporator coils, you have to understand that if we're looking for superheat, we first have to have liquid going into that evaporator coil. So let's just say that I had an evaporator coil that was empty of liquid refrigerant and I had a condenser coil that was empty of liquid refrigerant. Very simply, you can say there's just not enough refrigerant in the system. Those are very easy diagnostics. If I had a condenser coil that had too much liquid and I had an evaporator coil that had too much liquid, then very simply we would say, all right, well, there's too much liquid in the condenser, leaving the condenser, too much liquid entering the evaporator and now leaving the evaporator, so I'm not really boiling off, right? And so I'm flooded out, I'm overcharged, and pretty simple diagnostics. But what happens when we get a little bit more complicated to where we have too much liquid on one end and no liquid on the other end? What happens when we have just a little bit of liquid on one end and not enough liquid on the other end in any which way we want to dice it up? And so behind me, I just put this same illustration on our smart board to show you if we're dealing with superheat, we're dealing with the evaporator coil, you know, there's only 3 different types of situations our evaporator coil can be in. We have a high superheat, a low superheat, and the proper superheat. Now I did put some numbers here, and just to let you know, always go back to your manufacturer's suggested superheat value, okay? But if that's not there, there has to be a rule of thumb. There has to be some type of understanding on what's too much, what's not enough, without having to look things up. And that's what I pretty much put here. And you can pretty much use this on your calls, and I promise you, you're going to come out on top. Okay, this is about 99% accurate in almost every case. So if I said I had 30 degrees or more superheat, then that's a high superheat. That's too high. If I had 1 degree to 10 degrees of superheat, that would be a low superheat. Okay? And if I had 12 degrees to 18 degrees, if I was within this range, then I would be at the proper superheat. That would be a very ideal range. So we have a green check there, and we have, if this was the cup, we have what that pretty much would look like, right? When we look at ratio of liquid to vapor within the cup coil. And so here I have an X on it because this would be it's full, right? There's just too much liquid in the coil. All right, so we're pretty much going to be overflowing here really soon, and if we overflow with liquid, then that means liquid's returning back to the compressor. Okay, here we know we're not going to overflow with liquid. All right, and we're going to get a lot of heat transfer out of this one. Here we're not going to get much heat transfer, and we're definitely going to probably damage that compressor. So that's not a good range, right? This is a very good range, not a good range, right? So you can see just that 12 to 18. I'm not saying that this represents 10. This pretty much represents 1 degree of superheat because there's just a little bit of space up here where there's vapor present. And so over here we have a high superheat. So you see there's not that much liquid in there. There's a lot of space left over. That's not good. So I would say anything that's in this situation is definitely going to be north of 18, probably over 30. And so when do we know that we have a problem? When we get into these states, if I'm in the values of 1 to 10 degrees, I need to be concerned about that. And if I'm in the value of over 30 degrees, I need to be concerned about that. All right, and so I'm going to take you a step further, and I'm going to go ahead and dive into subcool. Using cups again, we can use the same cups. We have 3 different cups up here. 2 of them are wrong. 1 is good. We have a high subcool. If this is my condenser coil and I'm overcharged, or there's a restriction, something causing the refrigerant to not get through to where I'm condensing it and I'm getting plenty of liquid, okay, in my air conditioner, then obviously this would be a state of too much subcooling, and I just have down here 15 degrees or more. Now you may have a system that says that it needs to be 18 degrees of subcool, therefore you would be okay. And that doesn't mean that 18 degrees is going to look like this, because that coil, the way it's set up, it may have many sections, and 18 degrees is a good number. Refer back to our other videos where we talk about many different sections to our coil, that our coil is not one single coil, it's many sections of coil. We're not going to talk about that so much in this video. But a high subcool, just a general rule of thumb, you're not going to see subcools at 15 degrees that either aren't overcharged or with a restriction, right? But that's not enough data to diagnose a system by itself. We have to go back and you would have to see what your superheat values are. So you need all of that. But just getting back to the subcool, a low subcool would either be no subcool, which would be 0 to 2 degrees. I would say that would be a low subcool. And then what would be a proper subcool? Okay, 3 to 12 degrees is about your average. Your average system is going to be 6 or 7 or 10 or 11 or 12 or 4 degrees or 3 degrees subcool. That's when you know you have enough liquid leaving that condenser. There's enough charge in the system to be able to transfer that heat, to move that heat from one place to another. And you do that by the system having the ability to take liquid and change that state back to a vapor. So the process of evaporation is what we're trying to achieve, which is why it's important to not have too much of one value or the other. What gets confusing a lot of the times is when we're trying to take these values, like I have in this example here, and we're trying to figure out what combination, right, is bad and good. So I'm trying to simplify this, and let's just attack it head on. I have 6 cups up here. The top section represents my condenser. My bottom section represents my evaporator. And in each one of these cups, we have high superheats and high subcools, and low superheats and low subcools, and proper superheats and proper subcools. I have the X's on what you don't want and the check marks on what is good. Okay, and so it's when we start to match these up is when we start to better understand, where our mechanical problems are. Do I have a bad expansion valve? Do I have a pre-screen that's just clogged up that, on that piston, right? Do I have an improperly sized piston? Is my piston too big? Is my piston missing? Did somebody not put the piston in there? All right. What would that value look like, and how would I know that based on a theory? And then you take that theory to that next step, and then that next step you would wind up proving that theory. So at the end of the day, what we're looking for is we're looking for the proper ratios, and to achieve those proper ratios, we have got to make sure that everything is properly cleaned, that we're getting good heat transfer on our fins, that we're getting proper airflow, right? Nothing's restricted on the airflow side. All the copper pipes are the right size, metering devices are the proper sizes, and then we can begin that journey on, are these values even accurate values that I'm receiving? If they're accurate values, then we can start dictating what changes need to be made. And this is why in the last video and the video before that, I mentioned that pressures and temperatures are not enough information to diagnose a system. It's just a simple foundation. We have to have more data than just pressures and temperatures. And the real values that we're looking for to diagnose are going to be found with liquid and vapor. And are these ratios not balanced right? Do I have too much liquid where it's not supposed to be? And am I returning liquid back to my compressor? And that's where we need to home in on. We take this, and then we can leave the high temp category, which is air conditioning, and we can start exploring medium temp and low temp. So that's talking about commercial coolers and commercial freezers, because those superheat ranges and those subcool ranges, they're going to change. All right, so I can't bounce from a cooler to an air conditioner, or from a freezer to a cooler, or from a freezer to an air conditioner, because then we're going to just be putting too much into one video. So we want to first go ahead and take this journey and understand high temp. And it doesn't matter what refrigerant that I'm working on, because we're talking about the liquid and vapor ratios, right? So you can put 407C up here, 410A up here, MO99, 454B, R32. It doesn't matter what refrigerant you want to use. We're not talking about pressures. We're not talking about temperatures. We're just talking about liquid and vapor ratios, and that will never change when we're dealing with high temp. All right, so exploring this, there's no way you can take good and mix it with bad. Good's only going to go with good, right? There's no way I'm going to have the proper subcool and have an issue with too much or not enough superheat. There's no way I'm ever going to have a high subcool and then have the proper superheat. And if I ever did get those values, then there is something that has not been done right. Either your coils are damaged, your coils are dirty, you don't have the proper metering device, you don't have the proper pumping ratio on that compressor, maybe you're not moving that gas through the system properly, maybe there's some problems there, but there's no way your system can be working properly and then you read a good proper subcool or a good proper superheat, and that is in combination with one of these. Now when I say combination, what I'm referring to is we have to take what our condenser is doing. So A, B, and C values are subcool values that are represented based on the condenser. We match that up to what is going on our air handler, our evaporator coil. So condenser coil, evaporator coil, right? And so I have to take one of these three combinations and I have to put them on one of these three combinations, right? So one of the top sections will match up with one of the bottom sections. So if you ever are in a situation to where you have a good superheat range or a good subcool range and it's matched with one of these, then something does not make sense. 1 plus 1 equals 2. It doesn't equal 3. Right? So proper has to be matched with proper. Okay? And so when we're in, if we have good ratio with a bad ratio, and that does not add up, it's because something is not right. And so you will never be in that situation where you can check that box and say there's not a problem. If you are in that situation, most likely you have dirty coils or you have a bad pumping ratio. There's something there. And I'm not going to sit there and try to tell you every little thing that could be wrong, because once you understand this foundation, it becomes solid and part of your practice. Then through your everyday experience, you will get very good, very quickly, very fast at what you are doing. And you will have less callbacks, and you'll generate more satisfaction from your customer base. So let's try to say that C and F, okay? C and F. Oops. Okay? That's good to go. All right? So that only leaves us with a combination of A to D and E, or a combination of B to D and E. So let's look at what happens if I take A, okay, and I say A plus D equals, okay, A plus E. What does that equal? And then we can come back and say, okay, what does B plus D equal? All right, what does B plus E equal? All right, so there's our combinations. We know C plus F is good to go. And if C was matched with D or E, then something does not add up. If A or B were ever matched with F, then something does not add up. So you're only going to be good, and what you're trying to achieve is proper subcool, proper superheat. You're always trying to achieve proper superheat and proper subcool. So you're looking for C plus F. That's how you have to make this. But something is in your way of making that possible. So if we had the combination of A plus D, okay, then obviously I have plenty of refrigerant. I don't need any more refrigerant. Okay? Am I overcharged? No. It looks like nothing's able to leave my condenser and enter my evaporator coil. So this would be a restriction. Not a restriction in airflow, a restriction within the refrigerant system. And the only thing that could cause that is a pressure drop, where you go from high side to low side. And the only place that's found is at your metering device. Or your dryer, but we're not there yet. I will get into that. Most likely it's not your dryer. 99.9% it's not going to be your dryer. Could your dryer be restricted? Yeah, it can. But it's not going to create this. Most likely, 99% of the time, it's going to be the metering device. And it's very simple. That's really about it. How is a copper pipe going to just clog up? It's not like a, not like a golf ball's in there or something like that that can just clog it up. I mean, that doesn't happen. It's refrigerant. Nothing is going to be in there. You can have non-condensables, you can have moisture, you can have all those things that aren't supposed to be in there, but you're not going to have anything that's going to just clog something up. Screens can be clogged up. Especially if you're brazing and you're not purging with nitrogen, that will create a problem. But if we had A plus D, I don't need more Freon. Okay, and I don't need to add Freon to diagnose that. And if I was looking for pressures, that's not going to really help me determine that I have a bad metering device. But what will always help me determine if I have a bad metering device will be a high value up here of liquid and a high value of vapor. That tells me there's a restriction. So this bad plus this bad equals, we'll say, a restriction. So that's very simple. So we're just going to say this is a restriction. Restricted. And then in parentheses we can put metering device. Metering issue. Alright, so let's look at the combination of A plus E. Okay, well if I have a high subcool, that's a lot of liquid leaving my condenser, and I have a low superheat, which is a lot of liquid in my evaporator, not much vapor left, that's not a restriction. Because there's no way I could have gone from here to here that it's a restriction, and then gone from here to here and say that that's still a restriction. No, one's empty, one's full. So if I have an empty evaporator coil, meaning a high superheat, and then it's not allowing all this bottled up liquid to get in there, right? But if I have too much liquid here and I have too much liquid here, that can only mean one thing. I have too much refrigerant in the system. So A plus E is overcharged. And so that's not airflow related or anything like. Could airflow cause me to have a low superheat? Yes, it can. Absolutely. Absolutely. But if that's the case, I'm not going to have a high subcool. So what we're talking about is the combination of these two things. Because when you're looking at your manifold and you're looking at pressures, you're looking at suction pressure and head pressure. You're looking at liquid line temperatures and suction line temperatures and vapor saturations and liquid saturations. And you're looking at the superheat values and the subcool values. And all 8 of those values are going to spit out, a combination that you're supposed to understand what those numbers mean. And we're only taking a couple of values. We don't need the high pressure and the low pressure, right? Because obviously this is going to be a high pressure, but that doesn't mean that this is going to give you a low pressure, right? Over here this could give me a low pressure, but over here it's not going to give me a low pressure. So I don't know what that low pressure is going to mean, because it can mean a lot of things, but I know that when I have a combination of A plus E, I do know that that means I have too much refrigerant, and so that would be overcharged. When we look at B plus D, all right, so I have a low subcool and I have a high superheat. Okay, well if you look at our ratios, they're pretty close. So if my ratio is too much here or too much here, then I have too much. If my ratio is not enough here, very little, and very little, not enough, very little, then that means obviously there's not enough refrigerant in the system. So I would say this is undercharged. So B plus D would be undercharged. All right, let's look at our last combination, B plus E. B plus E. So I have a low subcool, right? Not good. And I have a low superheat. A low subcool with a low superheat. Well, let's think about that for a second. What could cause a low subcool? Well, a couple things can cause a low subcool. I'm not condensing that much. What could cause a low superheat? Very simply, what can cause a low superheat is maybe I'm not exchanging enough air, right? I'm flooded out. So I think the one that gets people the most The easiest one would be A plus E and B plus D. Oh, that's easy. I'm overcharged and I'm undercharged. That's simple, right? Put too much in, take some out. Don't have enough, add some. Find out why you need to add some at all. Possibly a leak. Maybe it was never charged properly. Restriction. Okay. Clean the pre-screen. Make sure, you know, the piston is proper size. Make sure it's not too small. Make sure that the TXV, maybe the power head went out on that thing. Maybe it's leaked this gas out of the power head and it just collapsed on you and it's not letting anything through that valve. These first three are the easier ones to troubleshoot, right? Always looking for, by the time you fix it, you should end with a result of C plus F. But B and E, this is the one that gets everybody in trouble. This is the one that we need to level up on, I think, the most. If I have too much refrigerant going into my evaporator coil, okay, how could that have happened? Very simple. Either I did not have the proper pressure drop, okay, something to hold back that liquid, okay. Say somebody changed the evaporator coil out and maybe the piston was in the other coil that they threw in the back of their truck and the guy just bolts it together, you know, puts the dryer on there, everything else, and guess what? He starts it up and all of a sudden he can't get the charge right, so he's trying to get to that 10-degree subcool or that 8-degree subcool on that Goodman or Daikin or whatever he's working on, and he's adding refrigerant, he's adding refrigerant, he's adding refrigerant, he's adding refrigerant. Where's the liquid going? Well, there's nothing to hold it back. You're just filling up your evaporator coil. And so, yeah, maybe if I have a low subcool and I have a low superheat, then that combination would make sense that there's a problem between these two, and the only thing that could be there, again, is the metering device. There's nothing holding it back. And so you just got too much going into it. Too much going into it. What are other things that could cause this? Okay, coil to have so much liquid in it. Maybe it's a dirty coil. Maybe I have improperly sized ductwork. Maybe my filter's dirty. Maybe the coil has bent over fins. Maybe the coil, okay, is too small. Maybe I have a large condenser and I have a small evaporator. Okay, people make mistakes. You got to take that in consideration. Look at your model numbers. Do I got like a 42,000 BTU condenser working on a 36,000 BTU coil? Right? Maybe I need 1,400 CFMs of air and I've got it stuck on 3 ton, which is 1,200 CFMs of air. The combination of a small coil and not enough airflow and maybe it being dirty and a dirty filter, and then I've got, you know, 3 tons of ductwork, and you name it. There's a lot of things that can add up and contribute to this situation. So that's why this combination of B plus E gets us into so many issues, because it's some of these, it's only one thing that's in your way of getting perfection. All right? Here, fix that problem. Here, take some Freon out. Here, add some Freon. But here, I might have to do 1 or maybe 2, maybe 3 or 4 things to make it right, to get to this. So B and E, that's a troublemaker. Watch out for that combination. Watch out for that combination. Most of the time you have a problem with B and E, it is due to neglect from the homeowner. It is due to it not being properly serviced from the company. It is due to somebody not putting it together right, poor installation, poor sizing. The combination of B and E is why this industry has so many issues, because people that are working on the equipment are not either good enough, qualified enough, care enough, or even understand what they're doing. B and E is the reason why you have failed compressors. B and E is the reason why I love what I do. B&E, that's a second opinion's best friend. And a good company, they could slaughter you. Be careful with B&E. I can't even tell you what B&E equals. There's so many things. We can go down the rabbit hole on B&E. So what are we going to say for B&E? That's just bad news. So how about we just write bad news? How about we just change the color on that too? There you go. Learn more. So stay tuned, and I'll get you to be a master at this, and then we can solve the combination of B and E. All right. Let's look at some situations that are data that we've taken out of the field, and now let's put you in a real live situation. Let's get out of the simulator, right, that we were just in, and let's look at real live data. We have things time-stamped. We're using software here. We know what type of refrigerant. We have 410A. The discharge pressure is 325. The suction pressure is 141. And if I said, hey, that's really good pressures. That's a good head pressure. That's a good suction pressure. Man, you're doing just fine. There's absolutely nothing we need to do. Well, it's up here not because it's good. It's up here because we're trying to learn from it. Now, it's hard for me to teach you a lot about something that doesn't have an issue. It's easy to teach you a lot about something with issues. So let's try to figure out what kind of issues do we have. Well, I'm going to say that, you know what, that looks pretty good here. I can't, if I just went off these pressures alone, man, that's pretty darn good. And it's 87 degrees outside. Yeah, that all lines up so far. Yeah. Yep. That liquid pressure, that's good. Uh-huh. So where's my problem? It's 410A. Where's my problem? What do these values mean? Well, what I'm looking for is my superheat. What else am I looking for? My subcool. And so what we're saying is you have 325 psi on the high side, and you have 141 psi on the low side. Well, you said it was perfectly fine. How many times did you do that this week? Or this summer? Why? Because you had a split across your evaporator coil that was 19 or 18 or 20? Okay. If you're in business to generate revenue, then you lost it. It's sitting right there still. If you're in business to retain your customer in your account, well, you may have lost them too, because in 3 months, they're going to tell you there's an issue and you were the last one there and you said everything was fine, so they're not going to use you again. What they used was your competitor. And maybe they sent somebody out there and they slaughtered you. If you're in business to be a non-profit, well, then you didn't help anybody. Okay? So I don't know what your aim is. If you're just trying to get by off of a split on an evap coil and a low pressure and a high pressure, that is not enough information to troubleshoot. And you're troubleshooting because you're looking for a problem. So when you go out to the field and you diagnose something, or you're just doing a maintenance and you're checking, you need to be looking for issues, not looking for ranges. Look for problems. Because then if you can't find one, then they probably have a very good chance that there are none. But if you're looking for ranges, well, I'm in range. I'm in range. Goodbye, have a good day, there's no issues. No, I'm not. I have got 87 degrees outside. That is my outdoor dry bulb. All right? So everything correlates so far. Maybe my indoor temperature, let's just say it's 75 degrees inside. Okay, this would be, I'm just going to put return air. Okay, maybe it had 75 degrees inside. All right? Everything's in range. It's R410A, it's within range. Okay? Maybe my supplier temperature might have been, 58 degrees. Okay, well that's 18 degrees. Am I right on that? No. It's 17 degrees. A 17 degree split. It's within the 15 to 20 degree range that you've been practicing this whole time. So if you're just looking for, hey, it's in range, that's like saying, hey, I'm going to come in and I'm going to kind of do my job. I'm in range. I got here. If you want to be top at your game, pay attention to these videos. 14.9 subcool. We're just going to round that up to a 15 degree subcool. Guess what? That's not in range. Bingo. Superheat. All right? I've got less than 1 degree, but not 0. All right? So 0.9 degrees. This is a problem. That's good, that's good, that's good, that's good. Right? My split, if I was looking for a split down here, and I said I'm 75 over 58, and so that equals 17 degrees. I hope my math is right. Looks like it. Yeah. Say this was return air. This is supply air. Everything's in range. Check, check. Here's your problem. This is not in range, and that is not in range. So what is that problem? What could give me a high subcool and a low superheat? Well, a low superheat, 1 to 10. Ooh, that's not good. All right? A high subcool, 15 or more. That's not good. Let's look at that combination. We had a high subcool and we had a low superheat. A plus E. All right. Let's go back. Looks like we're not in range. There's too much refrigerant in the system. Let's pull some Freon out. Or is there something else going on? So the first course of action would be the one that makes the most sense. Let's go ahead and do a charge adjust. Maybe we'll get that recovery tank out of there, open up that high side, squeeze some refrigerant inside of there. That head pressure should go down. All right, our suction pressure should go down when that happens. Our superheat should go up, and our subcool should drop. If these numbers do not move in that direction, then 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2, which means there is a second mechanical issue that is causing that. And so it's those little things that we have to be able to understand. And like I told you at the beginning of the video, when we make a change, what direction should our value do? Based off of the theory that we're saying, if I said I'm overcharged, I've got to still prove that. Because it doesn't look like it, right? Right? 17 degree split. Man, I'm afraid if I pull Freon out of here, that'll go lower. Well, let's find out. It shouldn't. Okay? That's why you can't go off of that and these. But if I look at this combination, and I say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and drop some charge, then this might level out at maybe, 310, And if that drops to 310, then this should drop down. We'll just say maybe that drops down to 130. And if that happens, then I would expect this to get down to probably 10. And I would expect this number to come up to about maybe, 7. Right? And if that was the case, just by taking a little bit of refrigerant out, not letting it out in a flower bed, putting it in a recovery tank, you're a professional, right? You owe it to the industry, you owe it to your client. By removing a little bit of refrigerant out of that system, just a little bit, just out of my high side. I don't even need a recovery machine to do this. I've got a recovery machine, by the way, has a condenser coil, condenser fan motor, and a compressor. So does my condenser. So if I'm running, I can use that becomes the recovery machine, the condenser. So I can remove a little bit out. Now let's just say I'm doing that and these numbers do not correspond. This is the 1 + 1 = 2, right? Then I have to go to that next step. Which the only other thing that it could be is what's allowing my subcool to be high and what's allowing my system to be flooded out. Okay? Well, if I'm flooded out, then maybe I'm overcharged and I've got issues with maybe I'm not moving the right amount of RPMs. My fan motor's maybe not pulling enough CFMs across my coil. Maybe my coil can be impacted with dirt. Fins could be bent over, the evaporator coil. Maybe my return line or my supply line is restricted. Maybe my filter's dirty. I don't know why it's dirty. If you're at this point, you should already make sure you had a clean coil. But there's a possibility I could have that in addition to that guy that came out maybe 6 months ago who saw everything, not right, and he added Freon to it. So maybe the first problem never got taken care of. That's the neglect part. And then it was further neglected by the guy working on it, and he just added more Freon. That would be 2 different problems. But let's just say I just had one problem for simplicity. Then things are moving in the right direction. Where do I need to settle out at? I don't know. Well, this needs to be at what? We want 12 plus. Right? Okay? So let's just say that I settled out at a 15 superheat and I settled out at a 5 subcool. I don't really care what these numbers are going to be at this point. If I'm good here, I'm good. And I might even still be at 17 when I'm done. Maybe I'm at 18. Who knows? But at the end of the day, this is one of those complicated ones, okay, that could throw us into a loop. But typically when we have a flooded out evaporator coil and we have a high subcool, typically we have too much refrigerant. So first you want to start with that. And then check to make sure all the values are moving in the proper directions, which means this one should go up, this one should go down, these 2 should go down, these 2 should go up, right? And when things are moving in the right directions, which it does take experience, which means every day you work on this stuff, pay attention to what you're doing, do it right, and you will level up very, 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 very quickly. Very quickly. It doesn't take a year to get this underneath your belt. It just takes you caring and being in front of it a few times, All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to erase this example, and we're going to go to another example. Okay, so let's just say that say we went to a set of Espins and we wanted to look at it. Now, I know these values are hard to see, so I'm going to write over this display here, and I'm going to write over it with, you know what, I'll write over it with white. See how that looks? I have 109, I have 40, I have 35, I have 297, I have 1.2, and I have 95. Suction line temperature is 76. Liquid line temperature is 93. And this is R410A. And hopefully that shows up very good for you. And I'm just going to be a little bit louder here, and I'm just going to write these same values with some red in it. And not to worry, because I'll write these values again over here off to the side. So there we go. All right, so let's go ahead and write them again off to the side. All right, so we have 109 psi. We have 297 psi. So there's our high side. This is our low side, right? We're dealing with R410A. Okay. Our next value is we have a superheat and a subcool. All right. This is 40 degrees. This is 1.8 degrees. All right. And then we have our VSAT, our vapor saturation, and we have our LSAT, our liquid saturation. Here we have 95 degrees, okay, and here we have 35 degrees, okay. Don't worry about these other values. You know, I guess we can write them down. It's not going to hurt. All right, so we have suction line temperature, and we have liquid line temperature. The liquid line temperature is 93 degrees. Okay, the suction line temperature is 76 degrees. So if we take 76 degrees and we subtract it from 35 degrees, we get 40 degree superheat. If we take 95 degrees saturation, which is the temperature related to that pressure, and we subtract it from the line temperature, we get 2, which we have 1.8 here. I'm not giving you my decimal points. This is actually 95.2. All right. And so when we subtract that, we get 1.8. All right. So where are our issues? Okay. We're within range here. I probably have a 15 degree split. Maybe the customer doesn't even know there's an issue yet. Maybe you're on a maintenance call and you read this. Where are my issues? Well, let's go ahead and check out these issues. Well, I know that's not good because I'm looking for 12 to 18. Anything over 30 is a problem. Okay, this is not good. All right, that's not good, 1.8. We're looking for, hey, give me more than 3. So if this is low and this is high, what combination would that be? Well, let's look. A high superheat, well, yeah, we're 40, so that's not good. A low subcool, because we're 1.8, that's not good. What does that combination mean? So a low subcool, which would be B, all right, with a high superheat, which would be D, B plus D equals undercharged. And so if you ignored that, then you also ignored the potential possibility of doing a leak check and solving that customer's issue by fixing the unsealed system, right? So the system is no longer sealed. It has lost refrigerant somewhere. Don't just gas and go, because that's not fixing the problem, that's putting a Band-Aid on it. And that customer doesn't even know you're doing that. Okay, that was pretty easy. All right, let's erase this one. Okay. Let's see what we have over here on this side. All right. All right, so here we have another field piece, digital gauges, just reading the temperature, not a set of Essmans. What looks good here? Well, guess what? I'm in range on my high side and my low side. My low side is 121 psi. That's always what we're kind of looking for, right? That high side, it's 284 psi. Hey, as far as the compressor goes, if you're just trying to diagnose on pressures, the only thing you have determined is I've got very good compression ratio. My pumping ratio on my compressor is excellent. Yep, I can convert a low pressure to a high pressure. Yep, that's what that means. So if I'm only looking for that, that's not enough information. What else can I get here? Okay. Well, superheat. That superheat is 23.6. That subcool is less than a degree. So it's 0.4 degrees. That's my subcool. I don't even think we care about anything else at this point going forward. We know it's R410A. This is my low side. This is my high side. It's R410A. Okay. I already see that I have a problem. Granted, I'm not above 30, right? But I'm not 12 to 18. Right? And guess what? I barely have 1 degree. I don't even have a degree of liquid leaving. Right? So that's not good. So I have a problem here, and I have a problem here. And when I look at this combination, what does that mean? Okay. Well, I'm outside of my superheat range, so I can't say that I'm proper. I'm not low and I'm not high, but I'm not proper. Okay, we're not looking for ranges. We're looking for, the superheat's in range, but it's not proper. Look at that subcool. I don't even have 1 degree. I'm closer to 0 than I am anything else here on this value. So I got a low subcool. And I'm not in the proper range of subcool or superheat. What could that combination be? Well, let's look at this. Low subcool plus, high superheat, because it's not a low superheat and it's not the proper superheat, so we're saying it's a higher superheat than it should be, because we're looking for 12 to 18, right? And when I take the combination of B plus D, I need to add refrigerant. Maybe there's not a leak. Maybe you're in the beginning stages of a leak. Should I do a leak check? Absolutely. Absolutely. Unless you can sit there and say, hey, that system was just started up a week ago and those are the exact same values they recorded then. They just didn't add a little bit more charge to it. I would definitely do a leak check. All right, let's go ahead and check on another one. Stuff isn't hard. By the way, I'll come back over here because I didn't do this. All right. and I said that this was my issue and that was my issue. Everything else was in range, but those, I'm looking for a problem. All right? I found some problems. Can't have a callback behind you if you're looking for problems. Okay, we have this example over here. I'm going to go ahead and write these values out again. I'm going to first write them on the board. We have 117. We have 23 on the superheat. We have 39.7 on the VSAT. I've got 63, 31. Excuse me. I have 63, 95, 29 on the subcool, 124 on the liquid line saturation temperature. That's a really high number. And then I have 446. These are PSIs on the high side. And this is R410A. And I'm just going to come back in red and just write over these. And I know it's going to be hard to see, and that's fine. I'm going to write it over here anyways for you. Thanks for bearing with me on me trying to highlight this stuff and make it more legible. You know, when you're getting data from the field and you're taking photos, it's easier for me to see it. It's harder for it to be recorded. A picture or video being re-recorded and then being edited and put back out to you doesn't always look the same the way I see it versus the way you see it. So we'll come over here and let's look at some of these values and move this out of the way so I have more room to write. Alright, so I've got 117 PSI. That's my low side. I've got 446 PSI. That's my high side. You're already going to say, oh, it's a restriction. Okay, well, what if it's also overcharged? I don't know. I haven't even gotten into it and looked at it yet. These pressures aren't enough information for me to give you the information I need. Even though a PT chart, oh, 117 and 446, that's great. What does that tell me as far as, you know, saturation? All right, let's look at that. All right, if this is going to be subcool, and then this is going to be liquid saturation, okay, then I'm going to get 124 degrees here. Yeah, that's the temperature related to that pressure on R410A. It's not enough information still, right? What's my temperature related to that 117? Well, over here, that VSAT, okay, it says it's 39 degrees. Okay? Not enough information. I need to know what is my superheat leaving the evaporator and what is my subcool leaving my condenser, right? Everything over here is my condenser, it's my high side. Everything over here is my evaporator, it's my low side. All right, well, over here I'm 23 degrees. Over here I'm 29 degrees. Here we go again. Here we go again. This is an interesting one. This is interesting. Where are my problems? Here and here. Well, this is supposed to be between the ranges of 12 to 18. That was our best we should be looking for, but I'm 23. But 23 is still under 30, right? But over here, I don't want to be more than 15, right? I don't want to be more than 15. So I want to be less than that, right? Well, I'm 29. So very simply, we can say that, hey, you know what? I have got way too much refrigerant in this system, first of all. First of all, I have way too much refrigerant. Way too much. This thing is severely overcharged. Now, how would I prove that theory? Get your recovery tank out. Put your hose on it from the high side. Open that up while that compressor is running on that condenser. And what changes should we be seeing be made? Well, let's look at that. If things were moving in the proper direction, then this number, if we start to remove refrigerant, should start to fall. Okay? Now you might be thinking, well, if that number falls, that number is going to fall. No, that's not true. Not true at all. Nope. That number should fall, and then this number should fall. Those two numbers should fall. All right? Obviously, that's going to go down because that's related to that. And then where will this wind up at? Well, most likely, this number will go down a little bit. That number might travel up a little bit, or these two numbers may even roughly stay the same. Okay? And so I could go back to where I have two problems again. Let's look at that for a second. Let's go back over here. I have, I don't have a 30-degree superheat, right? So I can't say that I have a high superheat. I definitely don't have a low superheat, but I don't have the proper superheat. So there's one problem. Why don't I have the proper superheat? We're going to investigate that, but it's not in a serious, it's not a big deal because I'm within the range on that. But let's look at that subcool. I'm not the proper subcool, so I don't have proper levels and I don't have low levels. I have too much. I have almost 30 degrees, right? So we got to let some of that refrigerant out, get that subcool down to where it's supposed to be. Well, if that subcool starts to fall, that liquid starts to fall, then what is that going to do over here? That's not going to fall and all of a sudden this come up. That's not going to happen. And that's not going to fall and this is not just going to go to the proper levels because I have two problems going on. But I can probably get this thing to where I drop that head pressure, I get that that subcool down, and we could probably get the thing to where it's somewhat running right. And we can work on that second problem. So let's look at that combination. Where does that combination leave us? We have a high subcool, so this is the A category, right? And then we have a, let's see here, high superheat, right? Because it was 23, right? Because it's not the proper. And so A plus D is showing that we have a restriction. We have a restriction. And I believe that it's in the beginning stages of that restriction. Now typically when we look at A plus D, we're really looking at, hey, I got a high subcool and I have a high superheat. Maybe this is sitting here at 35, 40 degrees and this is sitting at 30 degrees. Yeah, those two numbers, 30 superheat and 30 subcool, that would definitely say, hey, I got a restriction. But we have a 23 degree superheat. We're within range. So first thing I would do in that situation is I would sit there and I would try to bring this down, and I would see where does that leave me at. Okay, if I was to remove some refrigerant, that's going to leave me better. Now I may not be able to get the subcool all the way down to where I need to. Maybe the expansion valve is just acting funny and it's not going to allow it to adjust to the proper superheat ranges. Maybe I won't be able to get my subcool lower than 10, and maybe that never changes at all. Because if I take too much out, then that superheat should go up, right? And so if I'm having issues and 1 plus 1 does not equal 2, then I have to resolve that second mechanical problem. But the first one that I would look at is, you know what, let me go ahead and drop a little bit of refrigerant out of the system, get that subcool down, get that head pressure down, and if these two numbers are moving in the proper direction, then you know everything's fine. Let's just say that I start to remove refrigerant and you know it's just the subcool is still too high. Say I can't get that lower than 15. Well then guess what? If I wind up with in-range head pressure and I have a still too high of a subcool and my superheat stayed the same, then I would say, all right, let's go ahead and remove that metering device. That will be that second problem that I'm talking about. And so some of these things can get you in trouble. So a little bit of experience does help out. But if I was just looking at just the values of pressures and splits on my evaporator coils, that's not enough information for me to sit there and go, hey, this is your issue. Because it's going to be very hard to manipulate a pressure. It's going to be very hard to manipulate that temperature, that split. How can I try to achieve a good split across my evaporator coil, you know, return air 75, supply air 55, 20-degree split, that ideal temperature. How can I try to achieve that without knowing if I flooded out my evaporator coil in the process or if I'm still starving for refrigerant? You know, if I have too high of a subcool or too low of a subcool. Those are the things that I need to be looking for. And then those other things, yeah, I will have a good split. But I can't just trust the split by itself and trust the pressures alone because it's not enough information to show me. And so you might be a little new to this. Maybe you've been doing this for a while and this is really helping you out. So, you know, we'll go ahead and go to this next piece here. Go ahead and erase all this. All right. When I first started the introductory and I said, why is my subcool too high / too low, superheat, all that, you know, I didn't want to start you off here. I wanted to kind of start you with the cups and then move you into some realistic readings before I took you here because, you know, there are a lot of other things that could contribute to high subcools that we could not discuss when we were involving just, you know, a cup with liquid in it. All right, good subcool, starving evaporator coil. What does this mean? Oh, restriction, right? Because it's not allowing this to take place, right? And so there are things that contribute to those second problems. So when we get into that, let's get back to this 5th page. B plus E, very bad, learn more. You know, this is where we get into the things that can create B's plus E's. Let's look at a condenser. You can change this condenser motor out, and as you can see here, I got a fan shroud, and if that fan blade is not sitting properly up in that shroud, then the airflow that's going across this condenser coil, it may be missing an entire section of coil, which will drop my subcool value, all right? And so, you know, I might be fighting uphill trying to achieve the proper subcool or maybe get subcool, and maybe I can't get more than a degree of subcool, right? Because maybe this whole top section of condenser coil is still vapor leaving it. And that vapor leaving it, I got vapor going to it right here. So if I have vapor leaving many of these sections of coil because I'm not getting proper air moving across it, then I'm not condensing. That will also reduce that subcool value. So adding refrigerant is not going to help your problem. And that refrigerant that you add will be one of those things where it's like, man, I add refrigerant, my subcool doesn't change, but my head pressure keeps going up. Yeah, because you're adding pressure to the system. You're not creating liquid from it. Clean your coil. Get the fan motor at the right RPMs. Get that fan blade up into that shroud so air can actually get to this top section. There's other things that could factor into why 1 plus 1 doesn't equal 2, right? When things don't make sense, it's because things weren't done right. When things don't make sense, things are outside of the manufacturer's design. It's literally that simple. Another AC guy went out there and said, "Yo, I changed out your motor." Yeah, okay. Well, I was moving 400 CFMs at 4 tons, it's giving me 1,600 CFMs of air, and that was maybe a 2/3 horse or a 3/4 horse or whatever. And what did you stick on there? A 1 horse. Okay, and then you put it on high speed. Now I'm moving, 2,200 CFMs of air. Yeah. That's not going to really work very well, And so somebody's going to come behind you. They're going to be sitting there going, "Man, I'm trying to get the superheat and the subcool just right. I just can't." Well, that's because 1 + 1 can't equal 2, because that's already been changed. They put a 5-ton blower on it and set it for high speed on a 4-ton application. You're moving 600 CFMs of air, which is 1.5 tons of airflow more than the evaporator coil was designed to have. And on top of that, you also now are going to kill that motor because you have excess static pressure because the ductwork wasn't designed for it. And you wonder, like, why are my motors failing? Did you ever put the right CFM back into it? Why can't I get the right superheat and subcool? Is any of it in the design? No, you've altered it too much. Put things back to where it's supposed to. I'm not saying you got to go back with the manufacturer's exact motor that you bought off of their shelf that they manufactured and overpriced and sold you. I'm just saying that be within their specifications, their guidelines. All right? And there's a wide selection to pick from that can make that happen still. All right? And so, if I left dirt all over this coil, there's no filter I can change. If I left dirt all over that condenser coil and I never hosed it off, I can't sit there and go, "Well, I can see through it." Well, okay, I'm glad you can see through the fins. That doesn't mean that the plate on that fin is not corroded and unable to transfer the heat and reject the heat off the tubing and into the airstream. There's lots of reasons that can give me low subcool values. There's a few reasons that can give me high subcool values. A high subcool value can be, where's the refrigerant going? It can't get through the valve. Okay, well, I'm producing liquid. It's just going to bottle up. But if I have a high subcool, because that valve is restricted, then I don't expect much refrigerant to have gotten through there, at least liquid refrigerant to get through there. And at the rate of heat exchange, I'm going to have a high superheat, right? And so that combination is very simple, right? What else could cause a high subcool? Maybe I just kept on adding refrigerant. Yeah, we just filled it up. High head pressure. Now I have a high subcool with it. Now, as long as that valve is working properly, I should see on the other side of that a low superheat because liquid should almost be returning back to the compressor. So it's liquid leaving the coil and liquid entering this coil, liquid leaving that coil and entering my compressor. And then it's just liquid and liquid. And you'll kill it. You'll kill the compressor and it'll be your fault. So let's look at these gauges here. And let's just go over a couple things here. I'm going to say red. I'm going to say blue. All right, so the low side will be on this left-hand side. We're going to go ahead and just hook that up to our vapor line. We're going to take our high side. We're going to take our high side and hook it up to our liquid side. Okay. We're not going to worry about this center hose here. It's just there to let you know that's what a manifold looks like, just like the sight glass. And then we're going to have to get more data. That's not going to be enough data. But let's see what kind of data that we probably can pull off of that. We'll just put some numbers up there. We'll say that over here I'm reading 325 PSI. And say over here I'm reading 145 PSI. And we're just going to say that we're working on R410A right? What's our next value? Well, we want to know what these temperatures are related to it because they're obviously going to be there. And so basically we're going to need the superheat value and we're going to need the subcool value, right? Which we won't be able to get until we clamp it, right? But if we were looking for the VSAT over here, and if we're looking for the liquid line saturation, the LSAT over here, those values would be 52 degrees. And the value over here, that's LSAT here, would be 102 degrees. Okay, and then I'm not going to read anything here, so my S-bins will probably look like that because it's not reading anything. And so if you didn't have clamps, or your S-bins weren't working properly, or your digital gauges weren't working properly, you don't have enough value to determine why my subcool is too high or low. You're not even going to know that you have subcool. Okay, and so you got to be very careful with making sure your equipment is properly taken care of and working correctly. So we're going to go ahead and just take these clamps and we're going to go ahead and move our clamps onto our lines, right? We're going to come over here and just go ahead and connect those clamps. I'm going to draw our little wire like it goes up and connects. There we go. And so these are our clamps, and then once we do that, it'll compute the reading, and I'm just going to give you a value that we should be looking for, a good value here. We'll say that, you know, we're at 15 degrees on superheat, and say our subcool value, let's just say that that value was 8 degrees. Okay, if I start writing any data in the middle here, because we have more than 6 values, you know, it's just going to make it very messy, and I don't really want to do that to you. You know, these things will already compute this because it's going to know what the liquid saturation temperature is. It's going to know what that liquid line temperature is and that suction line temperature are. You know, so when this is reading the suction line temperature, that temperature for me to get to that 15 is 67 degrees, I believe. Yeah. So if I read 67 degrees here, and this would be suction line temperature. So I'm going to say SLT, right? Then the difference between the vapor saturation that's related to that 145 psi and this 67, it's a 15 degree superheat, which means I have the right amount of vapor ratio leaving my evaporator coil. Very safe for my compressor. I'm not going to lose any oil there. And then right here, if I was at 102, which is the saturation point for 325 psi 410A, and my liquid line temperature, I'm just going to write over here, liquid line temperature, okay. For me to have 8 degrees there, then I would have to be 8 degrees cooler than this 102, which means when I clamp this line, I would have to be 94 degrees. So I would read 94 degrees there, and that would mean that the difference between 102 and I've cooled it down further at 94, and that means I've got an 8 degree subcool because I'm at 102 here and I'm leaving my condenser 8 degrees cooler, proving that I have liquid. And these are really good ranges. All right, that tells me that I can trust everything is good to go. And this is pretty much all what you're going to do. You're going to hook it all up, and you're just going to make sure you clamp things to get those values, right? Refer back to our other videos on the different sections of coil, because here we have our TXV providing 4 cap tubes, liquid in, and 4 vapor lines returning back from the coil, emerging over here to 1 process tube, 1 suction line leaving. So when we are reading 67 degrees suction line temperature, this 67 degrees is based off of the sum and average of what these 4 are reading. So we could be reading a different temperature on each one of those, and then when we divide by 4, it could come over to 67. Refer to those other videos where we got into that. Same way with the condenser. And so I'm not done with you on air conditioning. I'll come back with another video. You know, I'm not going to use the cup analogy again. That's great. I'll probably honestly just get a pot and induction burner, turn it on, and start cooking, and put some water in it and let you see how fast things evaporate, so we can see that how we transfer heat from one spot to another through that process of evaporation, so you can better understand that superheat and that subcool. And then after that, I'm going to just dive in deep to coolers, and we will work our way down to freezers, and you know, and then we'll just get on to the next series after that. So thank you for watching. I care about, you know, your understanding of this stuff, so I express myself in a unique way as far as an instructor goes. I have the field experience that I want you to be able to not have to endure the way that the majority of us had to endure, which is learning the hard way. There's an easier way to learning, and I'm trying to help you level up so you can better your career or just your understanding of HVAC and R. So stay safe. As always, I need you to leave me a comment. I'll read it. Share this with your buddy. Get that out there to them. Don't hold this knowledge. I pass it on to you. You pass it on to someone else. Be real about that. You need to do that. It's our job to level up. It's impossible to level up if you're not trying to help the next guy, right? So help everybody, right? Explain this stuff to your customers. If you have a hard time doing it, share this video, all right? It's for everybody, all right? On top of that, subscribe if you haven't done so already. All right, click that notification bell so when we release that next video, you're notified. That way, you know, you don't have to wait for you to be in front of something you don't understand to see if we release that certain video. Just, you know, hey, there's another video. I just got alerted. Let me watch that tonight. That's important. All right, thanks, stay safe, and stay tuned.